We've talked a lot about different items in model railroading for beginners, but the one thing that I haven't done so far is terminology. Terminology in a railroad, terminology in model railroading. Today I'm going to talk about the difference between gauge and scale, the difference between turnout and switch, and a few more things. So let's get started with it right now. I'm Tom Kvichak, and this is Tom's Trains and Things. This channel was created to help other modelers who are in need of guidance in pursuing their dream of building a model railroad. And when we're building that model railroad, we need to know the proper terminology of what we're talking about and what we're using. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Some people call HO gauge, some people call HO scale. Some people call the turnouts turnouts, and some people call them switches. Now, there is a legitimate reason for every one of those, and we're going to discuss those, and we're going to go over a little bit of a history of railroads and what the gauge is, where that came from. Let's start this off by talking about the difference between scale and gauge. Scale is the proportion of real size to the size of the model railroad that we're using, say like 1/48th, 1/87th, 1/60th for O, HO, and N scale. Now, gauge is the distance between the rail. Now, what we use today is 4 foot 8.5 inches, but it wasn't always like that. It started out at a larger scale, a 5 foot scale. Now, back in 1825, George Stephenson was a civil engineer and a mechanical engineer, and him and his son created the first passenger railroad that was called Stockton and Darlington Railroad. Now, he used 4 foot 8.5 inches as the gauge between the rails. Now, this was in England in 1825. This is long before in the United States that they used that dimension for the rails. Back in 1886, the Pennsylvania Railroad used 4 foot 9 inches, and the Southern Railways used 5 foot. And I think it was in the end of May in 1886, the Southern Railways decided to move their rail in 3 inches so it would be closer to what the northern railroads were. They did this in 36 hours, and what they did was they took the inside spike of the western rail and moved it in 3 inches and did that all the way up. And then over a 36-hour period, moved the rail over that 3 inches all through the rails in the Southern Railway. So that became 4 foot 9 inch, and then later on it came down to 4 foot 8.5 inches. And that's where we are today. Where did that 4 foot 8.5 inches come from? There was a program on PBS a long time ago that discussed this same question of how we got the gauge for the railroad, and it goes back all the way to the Roman chariots, and that they found when they dug up, I think it was in Pompeii, they measured the ruts from center to center, and it came out to 4 foot 8.5 inches or 4 foot 9 inches. Now, they did this big old long story about that it came from there, and it just through the years it just came, and everything that was built with those dimensions on there. And what they said was that the horses were more accustomed to that distance, that measurement for the wheels. If it was any skinnier or any wider, it would pose a problem with that. Also, in 1870, Matthias Nace Forney was a editor for the Railroad Journal, and he had a discussion with a lot of the engineers for the railroads. And this is when they were doing the narrow gauge at the time, and it was discussed, and he published this, that these engineers said that 5 foot was a better gauge because the 4 foot 8.5 inches was suboptimal. But that never took on, since everything was already 4 foot 8.5 inches, it just stayed that way. And if you ever out in Colorado, Denver, Colorado, there's a Forney Transportation Museum there that I suggest you go see. We went there about 4 years ago, and it has everything in transportation as far as bicycles, motorcycles, carriages, automobiles, locomotives, and other rolling stock from the railroads. So if you're ever in Denver, go take a look at it. I'll put a link to their webpage down here. Now, if you want to refer to HO scale, that is the proper way of doing it. It's not HO gauge. Now, like I told you, gauge is the distance between the tracks, and a lot of model railroaders use that term HO gauge. You know, that's fine. That's the way they want to do it, but, you know, the gauge is actually the distance between the tracks. Now, if you got 25 model railroaders, I said this before, you're going to have 25 different answers. So however you do it is fine, but, you know, I just wanted to let you know that scale is the proportion of real life to whatever size that you're using, and gauge is the distance between the tracks. Now let's move on to turnouts and switches. Now a turnout is what the engineers refer to on the railroad. Now, model railroaders also refer to the same item turnout as a switch. Now, I'm not going to say that they're wrong. That's the way that they say it. That's the way they refer to it. And also, there's a single slip switch and a double slip switch, which is also a turnout. So, you know, even when you're referring to the turnouts, like a conventional turnout, Y turnout, a three-way turnout, a double crossover, double slip switch, and a single slip switch, you see the difference in there. Some of them are called switches and some of them are called turnouts, but the actual nomenclature for the device is a turnout, and the switch is a section of the turnout, which I'm going to show you on some pictures over here in a few minutes. Now, there are parts of the turnout that I'm going to show you on the computer here, and we're going to go over that, and also on the code for the rail. Now there's different codes on different scales. I'm just going to talk about N scale and HO scale. Now in HO scale you have 70, 83, and 100. Now most of the manufactured tracks, like from the Atlas tracks, the Bachmann Easy track, those are all code 100. Now when you get into the flex track, you can get code 83 and you can get code 70. Now in the N scale it's a little bit smaller, and it goes down to code 55. Now I'm not sure if the larger one is 70. I have a couple of pieces of flex track. Now as far as the numbers on the turnout number is referring to the distance, a ratio of the distance of the straight track and the curve. So like 1 in 4, and I'll show you a picture of it and explain that a little bit further. Now you may be wondering, why am I even bothering to go through this? Well, you know, I didn't realize it that, you know, since most of us are familiar with a lot of things in model railroading, and you know, we've done it since we were a kid, and you know, we've gone back to it, or we're starting out, we already been reading up on it. But there are model railroaders who are starting from scratch, and what brought my attention to this is a couple of viewers were watching some of my videos, and they're saying, what's this, what's that? And I was doing the video on the NMRA gauge, and he says, what's that used for? And you know, as far as the turnout, what's the number on a turnout? Because they had no idea, because they never heard it before. So this is basically the reason that I'm going over the terminology, and I'm going to continue with a few more videos after this one to expand on some of the discussions. Now I'm going to show you the NMRA gauge, but I'm going to do another video on the NMRA gauge showing you what all the different items on that gauge is. Now as far as the turnout goes, I'm going to show you the parts of the turnout, and I'm going to show you the relationship of the numbers on the turnout. Now if you have a number 4 turnout and a number 8 turnout, a number 8 turnout is a skinnier turnout, and a number 4 turnout is a little bit steeper, and I'll show you why that is. Here I have a series of Y turnouts. This is a number 2, and these two are a number 4. Now you can see the difference. These are different manufacturers, and even though both of them are number 4s, you can see that from the throw rod all the way up to the frog, it's a little bit different, and the angle is a little bit different. So nothing is quite precise between the manufacturers. So whenever you're working on something, you have to really check to see what the angles really are. This is a Pico insulated frog. This is an Atlas electro frog. I'm not sure exactly what their terminology is. The Atlas is a number 4 and the Pico is a number 5. This one's an Atlas and this one's a Pico. And I'll put these together like this. A number 4 and a number 5. This one's an Atlas, but I think this is code 100. I'm going to put these 3 together right here. And you can see I have 3 different numbered curves. This one's a Pico. I know this one, and these 2 right here are Shinohara. This is a code 83 regular track, and this is a code 83 bridge track. This one's made by Pico. This one's made by Micro Engineering. Now you can see the difference in the ties for the bridge track. They're closer together and they're a different dimension. Now this is N-scale track. This one here is code 70. This one here is code 55. Now both of these are manufactured by Atlas, but you can see the difference in the height of the rail on there. And also you'll notice the different colors in there. That's true with most manufacturers. I don't have any code 100 HO scale, but there's a code 83 HO scale right there, and you can see that in the difference between the HO and the N scale. You could pause your video here to take a look at this diagram of the turnout. It gives you all the names of the parts of the turnout. Now, whether it's a left hand, a right hand, a curved turnout, or a Y turnout, it's all the same. The terminology is the same on every one of them. Also, I'm going to scratch the surface on steam locomotives and diesel locomotives and how we identify between the two. On the steam locomotives, the identification comes from the trucks on there. As an example, you might have a 210 locomotive. I'm going to show you the difference. I'm going to put a display up here to show you some of the different ones, not all of them. I mean, there are so many different ones, and I'm going to do the same thing with the diesels. Now, the letters on the diesels all have a meaning on them. That, you know, they have S, SW, they have RS, they have F, they have E's, they have GP, and the list goes on. And there are so many different ones that you could look it up, and I'm going to give you a link for on the Wikipedia where it will cover every possible diesel locomotive and every possible steam locomotive, and we'll put all those graphics up here on the page so you could see that. Go take a look at tomstrainsandthings.com, where I have a bunch of other stuff on here that I don't have on YouTube videos, and I'm always putting more things on there. Check out Tom's Trains and Things and help support this channel by going there. I have some affiliate links on there. I have Patreon and also PayPal me, Tom's Trains and Things. So take a look at the webpage. In some future episodes, I'm going to continue with the topic of terminology and try to cover as much as possible that I can. Going back and trying to think what it was like from the very beginning is kind of hard. So if any of you out there have any ideas of, you know, what do you want to know about? What's this or what's that? Write it down in the comments section and let me know, because, you know, I started out a list of the terms that I want to use, and I'm going to continue with a few more videos, as many as I need to make it clear what everything is in model railroading and in railroading. I've had a couple of questions since Irma came through. They want to see my trains running. Well, I got a lot of my electronics packed up in totes and stuff. I wanted to keep it away just in case we had a failure in the roof, and so I got to stick all that stuff back up and get everything back running. Plus I was sick for a while, so we'll get that. We'll get the trains running on there, and I'll show you a video on that. So keep watching. I got more stuff coming up, and we'll see you.